we do in these fight previews. Austin Williams is taking on Patrice Volny, and I'm not expecting you to know Volny, but Volny actually fought on a regional Canadian card, beating Stephen Bang Bang Butler, who fairly recently fought Janabek. So, fairly interesting fight. I think that I'm curious, given that Matchroom's a more British focused company, but Williams was part of that Matchroom USA signing. What do you think of this fight for Williams at this point in his career, and what is your perception of Williams?
For me, Amal Williams is a fighter I've actually enjoyed watching. I've enjoyed watching his progression. They've brought him over to a lot of the matchroom cards, as you've rightly pointed out, and I've seen his development as a fighter. Early on in his career, I wasn't so sure if he had the right mentality and right attitude, but I feel like over the past 3 years specifically, that he's started to progress as a human, as a fighter as well, and I've seen a lot more humbleness around him. I don't know him outside of the ring, so it's hard to make that level of judgment because obviously some fighters can portray themselves to be someone different. They go into a persona or a character for the purposes of selling a fight. So it's hard to know, where he really is at. But obviously last year he had the fight with Hamza Sheraz and he lost in the 11th round. So he comes back and he bounces back in his last fight, and he did it, relatively quickly within a couple of months. And he now goes into this fight with Patrice Volny, who, you've rightly put it out there for the listeners as to who he is and what he's all about. Has he got the level of resume and fighters on there that he's been in with to challenge Ammo Williams? Is he going to cause Ammo Williams problems? I'd like to think that Williams has got the edge in terms of a bigger fight experience. So naturally, I'd be favouring Williams for the fight. But it's hard because if Foley's never really had that level of opposition to step up against, we really don't know how high his ceiling is as a fighter.
Where do you see Williams at? Because I think that most people are looking at this fight as Williams could challenge for a belt, or at the very least, he's going to be in very exciting fights that, could be fight of the year type fights. And I don't think people have the same excitement for Volney. So what's your expectation of Williams's career from this point forward?
I think Williams is a marketable fighter. That's the biggest thing that he's got behind him, as well as talent. He's really marketable. And I think when you look around the division, you could see Williams facing Adames. You could see Williams facing Janibek. You could even see Williams facing Erislandy Lara. I mean, they're three big names of the division that he could go in and face. That I think legitimately, he's got skills to cause either one of those three fighters mentioned problems. I think he's probably at that stage now where these are the fights he needs. This fight for him, where Patrice Volny is ranked at the moment, is strategically the right fight because of the rankings. If he was to do well in this fight and look good in this fight, that certainly props him up the rankings a little bit more and then puts him in conversation with those names. And I think because of his marketability factor, because he has had that injection behind him of promotion, it's easy to promote a fight for him against maybe Adames or even Lara in the US. Definitely more marketable fights. The Chanibek fight might be a little bit more difficult to market, but I think American fans would probably give him a chance because Chanibek hasn't always looked 100% the best fighter in the division. He's looked laboured at times defending his title, so people might look at that as, well, that's an opportunity for him to capitalise on and him for potentially become a champion. I mean, what's your take on his career? Like, do you think like the names mentioned are reasonable names for him to go in at this stage?
I think this fight tells us a lot about where his career is going. I think this is a real kind of 50-50 matchup. And I think he's had multiple evolutions where I was not high on him. Then I felt like he came back to the sport more focused. He beats Cordell Booker, which I thought was a 50-50 fight. He's been put in a lot of hard fights and won hard fights. The Shiraz fight, I thought he did very good until he didn't. So I want to see how he does in this fight because he won a fight. So it's not directly off of a loss, but it kind of is because this is a testy fight after the Shiraz fight. But I think there's potential, but I've never been able to get a good read on where I think Ammo sits in the division.
We'll see. Only time's going to tell us whether or not he's got that level to him. I think it's just going to take time. It's just going to take big wins. I think he needs this win against Volny. I think that, like you say, it's going to tell us where he's at and potentially where he's going.
So finally,